Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. In today's episode, I'm going on a fun little tangent talking about my latest reading obsession. And don't worry, I'm going to tie it into meal prep at the end. It's a bit of a stretch, but here we go. Before we get into the content, I have an email from Prep Dish customer Sheila. And Sheila writes, I am really enjoying the meals, the simplicity of them, and how well they fit in our lifestyle. My daughter is wanting to try intermittent fasting and eat paleo, so these menus are right up our alley. Thank you for taking out the decision fatigue of what to make. Sheila, thank you so much for sharing. If you're listening to this and want to try out our meal plans, we do have paleo plans, low carb. We also have what we have called our super fast meal plans, which are just healthy, tasty family meals that your whole family will enjoy. So whether you have dietary restrictions like gluten-free or dairy-free, or you're just looking for some tasty, healthy meals, I encourage you to try out our meal plans at prepdish.com/MPM. We have a special deal set up for Meal Prep Monday listeners. It's a 14-day free trial. So it's prepdish.com/MPM, which is also linked in our show notes. Okay, so today's episode, I just thought it would be fun to talk about books a little bit. I'll link the episode. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I went all in on memoirs and listening to all these memoirs and had a really fun time with those like last year, I think late last year. And the past month or two, I've had a new obsession. This is thanks to my sister, Kayla. She recommended Kristin Hannah novels, and I had not gotten into Kristin Hannah. I know she's been around for a long time. She also has a new one out called The Women. So I was like, that sounds like I'm just looking for something fun. This is kind of tacking on to those sleep episodes I've had. So we've done now, this will be episode number 4 that's sort of related to bedtime routine/sleep. If you're more interested in the actual routine and habits of good sleep, I encourage you to go back to the past 3 episodes and hear that. This one's just going to be a fun one. I wanted to share about these books and I've really been enjoying them. So my sister recommended it. I started out with one called The Home Front, and she kind of warned me. I mean, these books are not like, hey, chick lit at the end, you feel very happy and warm and fuzzy. And maybe you do at the end feel like there are these like warm and fuzzy moments. But there are so many, like, this is real life. This is hard. Hard things happen. There's always, someone that doesn't make it. There's always, so prepare yourself if you've not read a Kristin Hannah novel that they are very real and there's something real that is going to happen within the first half of the book. So I started with The Home Front. I then went into The Nightengale, which is in France and during the war. And then after Nightengale, there's one called Four Winds. I especially like this one. It takes place firstly in Texas, but during the Dust Bowl. And growing up in Kansas, I remember my grandmother and especially my great-grandmother talking about living through the Dust Bowl. And they stayed. They did not flee. This family eventually does. But I really, and my grandma passed in December, so I am a little sad that I didn't read this until after. I do remember having conversations with her about the Dust Bowl, but now I have so many more questions I'd love to ask her about going through that time. And then most recently, I read The Great Alone, which takes place mainly in Alaska. And I enjoyed all of them. They're the books that you can't, and so I did not read them. I listened to them. And I mentioned, I think on one of the other episodes, I've started doing Libby, which is my libraries app, because I'm doing so many audiobooks. I use Audible. I love Audible, but Libby's awesome because they're all free. It's, your local library and all the Kristin Hannah books are on there. So that's what I've been going through. I'm in line to get The Women and I keep pushing pause because after going through this many Kristin Hannah novels in a short amount of time, I think I need a bit of an emotional break. There's times when I'm in tears. There's, always some hard moments that I get very invested in. And I started these as like, hey, this is a nice, easy, historical fiction book that I can listen to as I'm drifting off to sleep. And I found, though, there's certain parts of the book where I've had to put it down and I cannot listen to them at night because they are just the situations are so difficult. So I've had to switch to listening to them during the day, which it's harder during the day for me to find time to do audiobooks. And this is the point where I'm going to wrap it into meal prep. So one of the things I found is while I'm doing my meal prep, that's when I can fit in my Kristin Hannah time, because when it gets to those sections where I'm like, I can't do this at night, it's just too sad, it's too hard. While I'm doing my meal prep, that is my special time where I get to fit in a little bit more of these novels, and I just continue to work through them. So if you have not checked out Kristin Hannah, I highly recommend it. I know I'm very late to the game. I'm guessing most of you have if you're into reading and into historical fiction. If you're not, check it out. Again, though, you've been warned, not all warm and fuzzy, definitely some real moments. I am guessing you're going to cry at some point. I always find myself in tears. Oh, and then one other thing with the audio versions, whoever the narrator is, at the end of one of the books, I believe it was The Four Winds, they had an interview with the narrator, and she does an amazing job of doing all of the voices. She really does her research in figuring out kind of the dialect and the speech during whatever time the book takes place. So she just does a really good job with the narration. I haven't looked up to see, but I know for at least the Nightengale and Four Winds, it was the same narrator. I think all four of them that I read might be, but she just does such an excellent job. So if you're into audiobooks, this is a good one to do on audio because of the narration being so excellent. But it is funny reading them all back to back. I was able to pick up on so many themes and little nuances in the way she writes her books that really overlaps into and crosses over into all the stories. There's a lot of consistent themes with mothers and daughters and different struggles, and even little things like, the moms always call the daughters baby girl and have similar nicknames and all of that. So it is interesting to be able to read them all back to back, even they're all kind of drastically different books. There's so many similarities in the themes and the struggles that the characters go through. So that is my fun little update on what I'm reading. Next week, I'm not sure what the topic's going to be, but I can guarantee it's going to be a little more related to meal prep. So stay tuned for that. A reminder that if you do want to try out their Prep Dish meal plans, the link is prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday. And that is all I have for this week's episode. You'll hear me again next Monday with another episode.